Good evening, I'm Klaudia Czerwińska and you're watching World News Tonight live from Warsaw. Thursday will see European Union leaders hold a high-stakes meeting with the bloc's defenses and the war in Ukraine in the spotlight. Will they deliver or part without reaching an agreement? More on that in just a moment. But first, a look at some other top stories of today.
We have a ruined building. This is it. This is their peace.
7 Ukrainian civilians were killed in another night of terror in Ukraine.
You are not alone, and journalism is not a crime.
Polish-Belarusian journalist Andrzej Poczobut, held in Belarusian prison, wins prestigious human rights award.
It will be possible to have your digital driver's license on your smartphone.
The European Union is working on a new digital driver's license, and Poland already has one. And we begin with our top story of today. Europe's top leaders are heading to Brussels on Thursday for high-stakes talks with the war in Ukraine, the Israel-Hamas crisis, and Europe's own defense on the table. Our EU correspondent Angela Skujins reports from Brussels.
Half a dozen major topics occupy the European Council summit on Thursday in the Belgian capital, spanning competitiveness to housing. But it's the world's major conflicts that are expected to take up much of the spotlight. This spans Russia's invasion of Ukraine to the Israel-Hamas war, as well as Europe's ability to deter Russian aggression by 2030 if that threat materialises. Now, one of the most significant outcomes from this meeting is expected to be the political endorsement of a €140 billion reparation loan for Ukraine. If all of the leaders give their tick of approval, this will invite the European Commission to explore this as an option and thus proposing legal proposals that are in line with international law. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has been a staunch antagonist against the idea. However, he will be noticeably absent from this part of the discussion. On Thursday, one expert told TVP World that this is trickery from Budapest. However, European leaders should rise to the occasion and seek this as an opportunity to shift the dial in Ukraine's favour.
The symbolism of the council meeting at this time is more important, and the fact that he won't be there will provide an opportunity, and I hope they take it, for right-thinking, reasonable political leaders to say, let's claim this space to be a guarantor and a supporter of safety and security and defence, both in Ukraine, but also in the negotiations regarding Gaza.
Ensuring that Europe can be ready for Russian aggression by 2030 will also feature heavily on the menu, with those leaders expected to give their tick of approval to 4 major projects bolstering Europe's defences. TVP World managed to speak to an expert in robotics here in the Belgian capital who expressed scepticism that the anti-drone initiative will be delivered on time by 2027.
We are still working on developing good drone detection mechanisms, good drone mitigation mechanisms. There are solutions out there, but it's not the case that we have a silver bullet solution which will solve all problems.
The world's major foreign policy issues, such as Russia's invasion of Ukraine, as well as the destruction in the Gaza Strip, are expected to take up most of the oxygen on Thursday. But commentators will be watching to see if those European leaders can find unity regarding their position going forward on these extremely important issues, or else division will continue to be sowed. But a lot hangs in the balance regarding this meeting and what will be communicated on the international stage to allies in the United States as well as aggressors in Russia on how strong Europe can be. Angela Skujins from Brussels for TVP World.
Thursday marks the 69th anniversary of the Hungarian Revolution, and far from bringing its people together, the commemoration highlights the country's political fault lines. 2 rival marches will take place in the capital Budapest, one led by Prime Minister Viktor Orban and the other by opposition leader Peter Magyar. Our correspondent Andrew Sweeney is in Budapest with the latest on what may be the starting gun of parliamentary elections next April.
Thursday marks the 69th anniversary of the Hungarian Revolution. Now, what was once a moment of solemnity in this country is now turned into a symbol of the growing political divide here. In the centre of Budapest, two rival marches will take place on Thursday. One led by the Prime Minister Viktor Orban and his ruling Fidesz party, and the other by Peter Magyar and his opposition bloc TISA party. Now, what makes the timing of this anniversary particularly important is the fact that just days ago, a potential peace summit between Russian dictator Vladimir Putin and United States President Donald Trump was axed even before it was properly organised. Prime Minister Orban had really tied a lot of his political support to the fact that he wants to portray himself as a peacemaker in Hungary, as a bridge between East and West. The fact that the proposed summit didn't even get off the ground is just a little bit embarrassing for him politically. Tomorrow, his so-called March for Peace will try to reinforce the image that he is in fact a peacemaker and that he is doing his best to make Hungary stand out in the global political scene. For Peter Magyar's party, it's a lot simpler. It is now or never to remove Hungary's, as he calls it, dictator from office. Now, what marks this commemoration has been particularly important is that it is also a symbol of a growing vitriol in this country and its domestic politics. An AI-generated image was published in local newspapers in the country a few days ago, showing Peter Magyar on his knees wearing a dog leash and surrounded by men waving Ukrainian flags. Magyar condemned this, saying it was intended to humiliate him as a man, a father, a politician, and a human being. Also, with parliamentary elections just next April, tomorrow's marches more or less signal the beginning of a campaign season in Hungary. In any case, Thursday's marches may not do much to commemorate the dead of 1956 and may in fact reopen old political wounds, as well as exacerbating those caused by current politics in Hungary. For TVP World, Andrew Sweeney.
As another day passes without peace negotiations, this serves as yet another opportunity for Russia to continue its ruthless attacks on civilian infrastructure, including kindergartens. Yes, you heard that right. A kindergarten was deliberately targeted. On Wednesday, multiple locations across the country were hit by drone and missile strikes, killing 7, including 2 children. Paweł Trzaskowski has an update on Ukraine after the last night's attack and brings us more in his report.
This drone strike in the northeastern city of Sumy was just a prelude to another night of terror in Ukraine. Russian ballistic missiles and drones targeted civilian infrastructure across the country, including in the capital. The onslaught comes against the backdrop of recent fruitless peace efforts.
We have a ruined building. This is it. This is their peace. This is their peace.
In Kiev alone, 2 people were killed and at least 25 wounded in the strike. Numerous apartments were damaged.
There was a buzzing sound. Then it suddenly started to speed up and boom, boom, boom. I jumped up, glad that my little one wasn't in the room where the windows were blown out.
In total, Ukrainian officials report 7 civilians killed across the country, including 2 children. In Kharkiv, one of the targeted buildings housed a kindergarten. Children had to be evacuated and are reported to have acute shock reactions.
We moved the children to the shelter and calmed them down as they were crying. Children are children. They ask for their parents. They were worried and scared. They were shaking.
Apart from civilian casualties, the strikes caused power outages in most regions of the country. As Ukrainian energy infrastructure is increasingly targeted by Russian strikes, Ukraine appealed to its partners to mobilize additional energy support ahead of the winter. Probably not the last one in this war.
When do you imagine this war might end?
I'd say that within 1 to 2 years, maybe, because in 1 year, the Russian capability to continue the war with this same intensity will go down quite a lot.
2 more years of a war that, according to the United Nations, has already taken lives of more than 14,000 Ukrainian civilians. Paweł Trzaskowski, TVP World.
For more comments from the former head of Finnish military intelligence Pekka Toveri, as well as former French General Dominique Trinquant, tune into On the Record, hosted by Alex Cadier, right after this show at 8:30 p.m. tonight. Let's continue. 2 imprisoned journalists have been awarded the 2025 Sakharov Prize for Freedom of Thought. The winners are Polish-Belarusian political prisoner Andrzej Poczobut and Georgian Sia Amaglobeli. The reasons for their imprisonment: Amaglobeli is a founder of independent media outlets and was arrested during a pro-European protest in Georgia in 2024, while Poczobut is currently serving an 8-year sentence for Belarus for allegedly inciting hatred. Karolina Stoltzman has more.
Those familiar with Poczobut hope the news of his victory penetrates the bar of his Belarusian jail cell.
He always was an example of extremely brave and professional journalist. Today, Andrzej is imprisoned, and I hope he will receive this news even from behind the bars.
The award going to Poczobut sends a message.
You are not alone, and journalism is not a crime.
This means that Belarusian issue is important for the whole Europe. I believe that also this is a signal to the Russia that Europe is not playing games.
Belarus, a Russian ally, has recently been involved in various talks with Western leaders, with the discussions centering on the release of political prisoners from Belarusian jails.
President Trump has now gone further. He has demanded from Lukashenko the release of all 1,300 political hostages: students, teachers, doctors, factory workers, journalists. And we all pray to see more people free soon, including our common hero, Andrzej Poczobut.
Svetlana's husband, a recently released Belarusian political prisoner, recounts what it feels like to be jailed by the Belarusian dictator Alexander Lukashenko.
I know I would never have survived 20 years of my full sentence. Under those same conditions, the fate of Alexei Navalny was very much in store for me. There are still around 1,400 political prisoners in Belarus waiting for their turn to be free. And the number is growing by the day. We must get them all out.
But the task ahead is difficult.
If we want to release more people, it's better not to speculate too much, because at the end of the day, it's Lukashenko who is taking the decision who can be released.
Poczobut has spent the last 4 years behind bars, and in total has been arrested more than a dozen times for his unfavorable coverage of the authorities and his activism work for the Union of Poles in Belarus. He is hoped to top the next list of political prisoners to be released from Belarus. For TVP World, Karolina Stoltzman.
High-level Dutch intelligence officers say the country is limiting intel it provides to the U.S. Meanwhile, NATO experts confirm that this is happening across the board as trust in the U.S. falls apart. How could this shift potentially affect both Europe and the U.S.? Is this a sign of a rift in defense and security cooperation? And can both sides involved afford these ties to loosen? Randy Potts reports on the latest.
Dutch intelligence services say they are sharing less information with the United States and instead working more closely with European partners. That's according to 2 Dutch intelligence officials, Civilian Intelligence Chief Erik Akkerboom and Military Intelligence Director Peter Resnick, in an interview this week. Both officials said the new caution toward intelligence sharing with Washington is linked to what they described as an increasingly autocratic course of U.S. President Donald Trump. The directors say this is the first time political developments in the U.S. are directly affecting Dutch intelligence ties, marking a break from decades of close cooperation with the CIA and NSA.
The U.S. is no longer a trusted partner, and arguably it is the trust amongst allies, which is the spirit and soul of the alliance. So why is that? Clearly with Trump, if you wish, the Pax Americana and the US-led global order, as we have known it for decades, are vanishing, And
it's not just the Dutch who are getting transatlantic cold feet. After decades of mistrust, spies all across Europe are beginning to work more closely, thanks to the Trump administration. The push for deeper intelligence cooperation accelerated sharply after the Trump administration abruptly halted the sharing of battlefield intelligence with Kiev last March, as well as J.D. Vance's speech in Munich last February.
As President Trump has made abundantly clear, he believes that our European friends must play a bigger role in the future of this continent.
Many European officials fear that transatlantic forums, including the NATO alliance, have already become less reliable platforms to share intelligence.
There is a sense that there could be less commitment on the part of the United States in the months to come in sharing the intelligence they have, both inside NATO and at large.
Former Finnish President Sauli Niinisto called last year for the EU to create a CIA-style agency coordinated from Brussels. Slowly but surely, Brussels is building up its own intelligence community. For instance, intelligence liaison officers now exist in most permanent representations of EU member countries in Brussels. In their recent meeting with U.S. generals, both U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth and Trump said they wanted the U.S. military to focus on domestic threats.
This is going to be a big thing for the people in this room, because it's the enemy from within, and we have to handle it before it gets out of control. We should use some of these dangerous cities as training grounds for our military.
On the bright side, as Washington's military might focuses inward, we may see an opening for a rejuvenated, European-focused defensive alliance. For TVP World, Randy Potts.
Let's now move on to Lithuania. Local authorities resumed air traffic at Vilnius airport early Wednesday morning. Following Tuesday evening's temporary shutdown, the close was triggered when dozens of smuggling balloons entered the airspace of the Lithuanian capital from neighboring Belarus.
The use of balloons for smuggling has complicated European aviation, which is already facing drone incursions. The investigation into the incident is still ongoing, and the number of balloons involved could still rise.
The number will change throughout the day as criminal intelligence operations are ongoing. 4 suspects were detained last night. In total, the State Border Guard Service officers recorded several dozens of objects in Lithuania.
Due to the incident, Lithuania temporarily closed both of its working border checkpoints with Belarus.
As the commander of the State Border Guard Service, I have the power to temporarily restrict travel across the state border or temporarily close checkpoints. But the decision to close them for a longer period must be taken by the government.
The crossings are reopened now, but Lithuanian authorities are reportedly considering closing the border with Belarus for an extended period of time.
The intensity and geography which stretches from Druskininkai to the Vilnius district shows that this was not a one-off incident, but a coordinated operation, and we hope that our services will be successful.
The first of the balloons were noticed around 10 p.m. local time. The airspace above the airport was closed until 6:30 a.m., and it affected some 30 flights and around 6,000 passengers.
The closure time is quite a long period. There have been no similar incidents like this before. It made organizational work at the airport very difficult.
The incident marks the second time this month Lithuanian authorities were forced to close the Vilnius airport due to the incursion of unknown aircraft into its airspace. For TVP World, Karolina Stolzman.
Now, something for all the active drivers in Europe. In a push to make driving safer and reduce fatalities, the EU is introducing new rules overhauling driver's licenses and regulations. The legislation calls for an EU-wide digital driver's license, something which is already a reality in Poland. Maciej Wilowski explains what the changes would involve and how they could affect drivers across Europe.
The EU is overhauling its driving regulations, and a common digital license is among the main features of legislation passed on Tuesday. As part of a modernization effort, digital licenses are slowly expected to become the norm, though drivers will retain the option to keep their physical license.
In the future, it will be possible to have your digital driver's license on your smartphone. This has to be implemented by 2030 by the member states. But as the rapporteur, it was particularly important to me that people will still have the choice.
Digital licenses are already a reality in Poland through the mObywatel mobile app, where residents can easily access their license, view any outstanding tickets or penalty points, and report an accident. While several EU countries have introduced digital licenses in recent years, a single EU-wide platform hasn't been developed yet. Along with digital licenses, the EU legislation includes new rules for novice drivers and tailors the expiration date on a license to a driver's age and vehicle type. It will also more effectively streamline the reporting of traffic violations, including reckless or dangerous driving, across borders. The legislation is geared toward making driving safer and reducing fatalities, which remain stubbornly high.
In certain countries, we are seeing road deaths drop, but we're looking at around 20,000 people a year who are dying on our roads in Europe.
Poland is one of those countries, with road fatalities down 35% since 2019, the biggest rate of improvement of any EU country over the past 5 years. The EU's long-term Vision Zero ambition calls for reducing road deaths to zero by 2050. With sustained effort and a greater emphasis on safety, this vision could become a reality. Maciej Wilowski for TVP World.
An important meeting of the European Council is set to take place on Thursday. The discussions will involve everything from Ukraine and defense spending, migration, developments in the Middle East, but also Russian sanctions and potential use of frozen Russian assets. Joining me now is Garvin Walsh, CEO of Article 7 Intelligence for Democrats. Garvin, thank you so much for joining me on the program tonight.
Good evening.
So, what do you think? What are your expectations regarding the Council tomorrow?
Well, it's clearly an important meeting, and I think one of the most interesting things is that Viktor Orban has decided to be away for some of the meeting. We don't entirely know whether he's trying to repeat his ability to avoid vetoing something by being out of the room. The particular issue in question is the plan to use frozen Russian assets to help fund Ukraine's war effort. And Hungary has set itself against this, but Viktor Orban does have a way of finding ways to avoid blocking things when the pressure gets intense upon him. He said he's handing his veto over to Robert Fico of Slovakia, so I don't know whether that's necessarily going to help, but we'll have to see how things evolve tomorrow morning.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned Viktor Orban and Hungary. I mean, we were supposed to have negotiations. We were supposed to have the meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin take place in Budapest. What an interesting place to choose, especially in regards to discussion about Ukraine. It's not happening as of now. Now he is trying to sit on the fence between the European Union and Russia. What does it say about Orban? Where do you think his alliances lay closer to?
I think Orban is clearly taking a pro-Kremlin position at the moment. He's continued to block sanctions, to exact a very high price for EU sanctions. He has tried to block all kinds of cooperation over Ukraine. He has not been the only person blocking the use of frozen assets, but he has continually thrown sand in the gears of coordinated European policy. He has rhetorically attacked Ukraine. He has mounted a campaign of propaganda domestically against Volodymyr Zelensky. Russia, at the beginning of the war, it seemed that Hungarian officials were thinking of seeing if Ukraine had been defeated, whether they could find some ways to expand into Transcarpathia, which during the Austro-Hungarian Empire was part of Hungary. So he's generally played a pretty destructive role in this crisis, and he's continued to do that. His foreign minister is actually decorated by the Russian Federation. This has clearly been Orban's game. It's not what he used to think. There were about 20 years ago, he did say that Hungary shouldn't become the comfortable chamber of Gazprom, but instead he's completely reversed course and now takes a pro-Kremlin position.
When it comes to such a meeting of this caliber in the European Union, this is going to be definitely a big test of unity. When it comes to veto power, do you think that we are going to see the usual suspects who are going to use their veto power when it comes to different decisions that would have to be made, or are we to expect somebody else joining the team?
Well, this is indeed the question. I mean, apart from Hungary and Slovakia, the most strenuous opposition to using frozen Russian assets for Ukraine has come from Belgium. They're worried about liability, but they're also, I think, just a bit nervous about taking this action on their own. It should be really important for Belgium to step up here. Belgium is a major importer of Russian gas as well. The amount of Russian gas it imports is almost the same as the amount of military aid it's given to Ukraine. It's about the only European country in that kind of situation. So we really need to wonder whether the Belgians will be persuaded that they don't have to incur any risks relating to the transfer of Russian assets. That's because these assets happen to be held in a Belgian bank. And so in some legal theories, they could end up being on the hook if Russia objects to this. But I think there are some creative minds working to solve this problem, and really there would be no reason for Belgium to continue to block this initiative.
So you don't think that there is going to be much opposition from Belgium? Do you actually think that EU is finally going to be at least one step closer to using those frozen Russian assets?
I think there should be no reason for Belgium to block the seizure of Russian assets. That doesn't mean they won't, but I don't think they have any justification anymore to block it. I think safeguards are in place in the plan to make sure that they should be able to be safeguarded from any legal risk that they're worried about.
When we look at the totality of the measures that were taken so far by the EU member states when it comes to supporting Ukraine, do you think that there is a potential for a change, for more support? Do you think that this is actually a viable support, or are these structures somewhat, I would say, stuck when it comes to providing further help for Ukraine?
I think there's been a very important step taken by Sweden today. They concluded a long-term fighter jet contract with Ukraine to supply 150 Gripen fighters over the next few years. So the first ones will be delivered in three years' time. They're top-of-the-range, newest fighter jets, and they're designed specifically to be able to fight against an enemy against whom we don't have air superiority. So they are ideally suited for Ukrainian defense. But it's an important vote of confidence for Ukraine, because they're saying Ukraine's still going to be there in 3 years, it's still going to be in the fight, and Sweden's going to start manufacturing equipment with this kind of long lead time. I think we've seen the Nordic countries, the Baltic states, and Poland really step up to help the war effort, whereas certain Western European countries have found it more difficult. I really think they should follow the lead of Northeast Europe here and step up their efforts to support Ukraine. A lot of this is going to happen at the member state level because there's a limit to the European Union's powers in this area. But member states should be also step up here. We have debt guarantees that Poland and France have taken large amounts of. We have other instruments, but really it's a matter of doing what is needed most quickly, rather than working out the best institutional framework. We can think of long-term institutional frameworks later, but for the moment we need to think about how Ukraine's going to survive the winter, how Ukraine's going to be able to defend itself against drone and missile attack, and what Europeans can do to support that effort.
Well, when we look at the decision-making, especially during such meetings, we also spoke about the veto power. Do you think that the EU is going to be able to somehow bypass or overcome this sort of a majority vote? So you have to have all the member states to vote, but are there any leeways that the European Council could potentially take to bypass that?
They have something called enhanced cooperation, where a number of member states can decide to go ahead and cooperate more deeply on any issue. The trouble is that needs a unanimous vote before it can be activated. So you need to see if that can happen. They can choose to move to qualified majority. So this is roughly a sort of 3/5 majority of the European Union. They can choose to move to that, but again, only by a majority vote. There's some other things they're doing when it comes to accession. So accession process happen in these things called clusters and chapters. And what they're trying to do now is open as many as possible so that Ukraine and Moldova can make progress without Hungary being able to veto that stage of the proceedings.
And finally,
of course, whether Hungary will continue to be able to do that or continue to choose to do that after next April's elections is another matter. Viktor Orban is very far behind in the polls, so this problem might get less serious over time.
And finally, do you think that after recent statements, different statements, a variety of statements, a selection, so to speak, by Donald Trump in regards to Ukrainian safety and their standing on the battlefield, do you think that this meeting taking place on Thursday is going to push Europe to making slightly different decisions, perhaps, when it comes to its own security and safety?
Well, I think Europe needs to just go ahead and use the fact that it's a rich continent with a strong industrial base to build up its own defense, and therefore become less dependent on the United States. Then it will matter significantly less what Trump says, because what Trump says changes every 5 minutes. So let's not worry about that. Let's concentrate on what we can do, which is considerable. There are certain gaps we have to plug, so let's prioritize those, particularly in suppression of enemy air defense and missile defense capability. So let's fill those gaps. Let's support Ukraine ourselves, and let's stop being in a position where we have to worry about what Trump says one day and then the other.
Thank you very much. Garvin Walsh, CEO of Article 7 Intelligence for Democrats, was my guest. Thank you, Garvin.
Thank you very much.
And so this would be all for now here on World News Tonight. I'm Claudia Czerwinska, but please do not go anywhere because we have On the Record coming up right after this show, and we'll see you there.